Good morning and welcome back to On This Day in History. It was on this day, 41 years ago, when I was 22 years old, that I broke my left ankle. So this was a significant life-changing event for me. I recovered from it, but I went through a lot of stuff. This was only my third, I believe, emergency room visit. My first one being when I was about 5 and I split my head open while riding my tricycle. And another time when I was 13 or 14, I got a piece of plaster from the ceiling in my eye and couldn't get it out, and I had to go in and they kind of washed it out. But this emergency room visit resulted in a 4-day hospital stay. So I was roller skating. It was a Sunday night. My work schedule back then was I was working a security job, and I believe I worked only 4 days a week. I'm a little fuzzy about this, but I believe I worked 4 days a week. I worked 2 11-hour shifts or 13-hour shifts. I don't remember which. The night ones were like 6 at night till 7 in the morning. I think I worked 2 of those, and then I worked 2 weekends, which I believe were 5 to 6 or 6 to 5 in the morning. I can't remember, but it was a Sunday night, I know that. And I don't remember exactly how wintry the weather was right before this, but I remember immediately right after. I had been working. I'd gotten off work at either 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and then went to the skating rink, and I believe it started at 8 or 8:30, and it was the adult session, the adult night, and I think it ran from 8:30 to maybe 10:30 or 11 o'clock, and it was at the end of the session, towards the end, the owner of the skating rink had a set of skates for sale, and I didn't own my own skates at this time, and I was kind of new to skating. I had joined the speed skating team and all that, so I wasn't any kind of an expert skater whatsoever. But I tried on these new skates. He wanted me to go out there and try them on, and I went out there and I did like 1 lap, and then I lost my balance and I started going over backwards. And when I fell down, say these are my feet, when I fell down, my left leg, which is what I broke, the ankle, had crossed my right leg, and I slammed down on the ground like that, and that's when that ankle shattered, and it broke right above the joint, and it was extremely painful. I knew right then, I felt this crack, like breaking a stick. It was very painful, and immediately I knew a lot of people out there came over and started to help me up. Oh, no, and they left me back down, and they cleared the floor, and everybody's standing around watching as I'm being tended to out there. Anyway, they got me up and got me over off to the side, and then we finished out the rest of the session, probably about 15 minutes. They gave me ice and put on it, and I was just in a world of hurt. I was in pain. I knew I'd broke it. And they arranged I didn't have a car at this time. I didn't drive at this time. But they had arranged to get me, somebody was going to take me to the hospital, to the emergency room. It was obvious that it was broken because, you could see just this massive swelling on the side of it. Around 11:30, quarter to 12, when they got me to the emergency room, and they got me in there, and again they put ice on it, and then they left me in there for a long time in the emergency room, and that ice, I was just shivering, I was shaking, I was scared to death because I had not ever broken a bone or anything like that. And at some points they told me that I would be admitted and they would perform surgery the next day. They needed to put my leg in a a great big brace for the night so I could sleep in it. They had me in traction. Once they got me into a room, they had my leg up in the air and tied to the end of the bed, and I had to sleep like that all night. They had me on some pretty powerful pain pills, whatever it was. I know later on I would be on morphine. I believe they called it Demerol. And boy, that was a trip. That's the first time I'd ever had any kind of opiate pain pill at all, and I loved it. I was like, oh, can I get a 6-pack of this to take home, you know, jokingly. But I was scared to death, and this surgery was scheduled, I guess, for the next day. The next morning, I know it was the next day, I think it was the next morning, and when they wheeled me down there, and they got me into the surgery room, I remember them pumping me full of whatever they needed to knock me out, and it was just wild. I remember just being so high. I don't remember the recovery room at all, but once I got back to my room, the one thing that bothered me so much is there was no clock in the room. I didn't know what time of day it was at all. Cable TV was around, and that's all I could do, was just sit there and flip through the channels. I had no idea what time it was, and I don't remember if the TV showed the time of day or not. But I'd constantly have to ask people, what time is it? At some point they got me up, but I was there for 4 solid days. And they were giving me this Demerol. I guess it was an IV, maybe in the back of my hand. I don't remember. I know I didn't have to swallow pills or anything like that. And after 3 or so days, I guess maybe the 4th day, they got me up, and I had to start walking around with a crutch. And by that time, they had put the cast on. I now had a cast. They'd given me a cast the day before or something. But at first, they didn't have me in a cast, I don't think. So long ago, 41 years ago, is a long time to try to remember precisely what happened. But they got me up and walking around, and I remember just getting so dizzy because of that, because I had been flat out for 4 days, and it was crazy. And then before they had arranged for, I think my dad actually came and got me. I think it was mom and dad. And before they got there, they wheeled me in a wheelchair downstairs to the financial office because I did not have medical insurance. My workplace didn't offer it. I didn't really care about it. Medical insurance was kind of a new thing. A lot of people didn't have it. It's far different than it is today, where you have to have it, I guess. I don't know if we still have to have the Obamacare. Get me in that office, and then we got the financial lady is like, okay, we need a down payment of, I don't remember how many hundreds of dollars. The bill altogether was like $3,500, and that's $100, not $1,000. Today that'd be $35,000 probably, easy. But it was $3,500. They wanted a humongous down payment on it, and then set up a payment plan. And I had nothing. I was like, I have nothing. I have no money to pay you right now. I'm not working. I have no down payment. I didn't save money back then. I went through money like crazy because I was just in the big party life, and I didn't make much money. I think in my job I made about $4 an hour, and I was not good at finances in my early days. I didn't really care about it. And I lived in a house with roommates because it's all I could afford, and I didn't have a car because I couldn't afford it. Before they would let me go, I had to agree to a weekly amount to pay. And the lady had talked me into paying $60 a week payments on this bill. I remember sitting there in that wheelchair and my legs all propped up, and it's hurting. It's causing me some pain because they had taken me off of the morphine at that point, and I was supposed to be just taking aspirin or whatever it was back then. I don't remember. And I was just uncomfortable, and I just wanted to go, and I think my ride was there at that point. And so I just agreed to $60 a week, not a month, but a week. And here I am. I'm not working. I don't have money to pay for probably my next month's rent, whatever it was. So on the trip back home, or in a phone call, my mother asked me, how are you going to pay this? What kind of arrangements did you make? And I told her, $60 a week. And, oh, you can't do that. You're going to, we already called the plant, and you're going to get sick leave, but it's not going to be very much. It'll be just enough for you to live on. So she actually made the phone call to the hospital and arranged to make that more like $5 a week. And that's what I ended up with. I ended up paying $5 a week forever. $3,500 at $5 a week. That's all the best I could do. Well, eventually that got completely canceled at some point because I never was able to set aside more than $5 a week, whatever it was, $20 a month. And after a while, they just said, "Oh, forget it. We're just going to wipe the account out," and they did. But that would have absolutely destroyed my credit. I didn't have credit cards back then, nor did I really care about it. So when I got home that day, my first memory was as they brought me into the house there. One of my roommates, had just mowed the grass. It was a nice, sunny, very nice day outside, and I remember that smell of freshly cut grass for the first time that year. And the grass was really dark green because it hadn't been mowed, and it was springtime. Was just getting there. You know how the lawn is when it's first starting to regrow in the spring. It's really dark green, and it has a very distinctive smell, and that smell is something I've never forgotten. Every time spring gets here and a lawn is cut for the first time, that smell just triggers that memory of my being at home and recovering. Recovery was really tough. I was on crutches. My leg hurt for a while. When I got home that first day, one of my roommates said something like, "Oh, I bet you'd like to have a beer, wouldn't you?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I guess so." And I didn't really feel like it, but they got me a bottle of Budweiser, regular old Budweiser. And I think I had had some lunch right before that. And then I had this, I was laying in bed because that's all I was going to do. I had a little TV in there with like 2 or 3 channels. And watched Andy Griffith every day on there because that's one of the channels, just had that on there a couple times a day. And that became a favorite TV show for me. But I had that bottle of beer, and it was sitting beside my bed, and I drank almost all of it. And then I don't remember anything until the next day. So it was around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon when I drank that beer. And I woke up at like 6 o'clock the next morning. I'd slept for about over 12 hours. And that beer had just knocked me out because of the opiate pain pills I had been taking, and it was crazy. It was, I didn't die, of course, but, that stuff was still in my system, and it put me to sleep for a good 12 solid hours. So I sat at home and recovered. I wasn't going to be able to go back to work for probably close to 2 months. I was getting my sick leave because I'd worked there since I got out of high school in 1979. So I had quite a bit of sick leave, but it wasn't very much. So it was about 4 weeks or so hobbling around. I couldn't stand. I couldn't put weight on my left leg because I had a plate and 5 or 6 screws in there, and one of the screws went through the joint, and they were going to have to take that screw out before I could start putting weight on it, and it took about 4 weeks or so, maybe 6 weeks. So they finally let me go in, and they removed the cast, and then they scheduled the appointment, and this was at a different hospital. And this was a really bad experience because I had to, I believe, again, my dad drove me up there and dropped me off. And I had to go in there and admit myself into this hospital for surgery. And I just felt so bad. I felt like I was going to the electric chair. I was so sad that I was going to have to do this. But it's the only way to get back to living life again. So this was kind of a bad experience for me because I was in the orthopedic ward at this hospital, and this was the hospital I was born at originally. And I shared a room with 4 other guys that were all having either hip or knee or foot surgeries. And it just wasn't very pleasant. Those guys weren't really people that I would hang out with. And one of the guys, after his surgery, he just moaned and groaned forever. It was horrible. And my bed was the last one in this row, and because I could only see the TV like this, so it's a really bad experience. But the one thing I do remember is when they took me in for surgery, they were getting me ready, and I was on the table, and they were giving me an IV, and the guy says, "Okay, count down 100 backwards from 100," and I start doing that, and then everything just like no, and it was one of the most wonderful feelings I ever had, being so high like that. After they sent me home from that, I had to take I had to be on some, I believe they gave me a prescription for Tylenol 3 or something, and that was wicked stuff. I think that had codeine in it. And I took it for a while, but I didn't like the codeine. It made me feel really strange. It wasn't anything like opiate makes me feel. And it didn't take me long, and I could now start bearing weight, so I had to learn how to, walk again, and I used crutches for that. And then after a while, I got to where I could walk without the crutches. It was painful, and I walked slowly. But after a while, they said, you can go back to work, but you got to be careful not to, don't be jumping around or anything like that for a while. The more time you can give it, the better. Anyway, so that is my story. I ended up in all that debt. That second surgery, I believe they told me, they called, because the $3,500, I was still paying on that. It would be like a year before they would actually just forgive that, and that would be that. But that second surgery, I don't remember if I ever knew how much that cost. But at some point they had called the financial person from that hospital and said that the surgery, they were going to forgive it. But I don't remember what it cost. So, but then I went for over a year paying on this other debt, and that was my first financial crisis. But then it was over pretty soon. But my credit was ruined, but I didn't care about that. So life kind of gets back to normal, and eventually I get back into skating. That was tough to do, but my ankle, it took a while. It took a good year before I was, comfortable enough to kind of forget about it and just live life as it was. So I was 23 at that point when life started getting back to normal, maybe 24. And I started smoking marijuana quite heavily after the surgery. And that would be a habit that would come back to haunt me, and I would eventually, I'd realize that I have no money, I can't afford to live in my own house or have a car or anything, any kind of nice stuff, until I quit doing that. So in 1984, and it was spring of 84, I decided to move back with my parents' house, and that was really another big turning point for me. As I moved back there, I left the marijuana and the drinking way back at the roommate's house, and I'd already had a car. I had bought a car for $50, and I had to make payments on it because I didn't have 50 whole dollars to spend, but I'd bought a whole car that had been totaled, but it still was a legally running car, but had a bent frame and everything. But that car was great. I drove it for a year and a half or something, and ended up selling it for $150. But I got, once I moved back home, I got my act together. I found a second job as a dishwasher, and this was in around 1985, late 84, early 85, and that started my food service career, and I ended up eventually being in food service permanently. And so that's the story of May the 2nd, 1982, breaking my leg. It was a tough recovery, some painful memories there, and my ankle would be like perfectly normal until I got to be about 45, 46, 47. I started noticing pain at the end of my workday. And eventually I would be diagnosed with arthritis in the joint. And my doctor says it's there because my ankle was altered and it's now deformed. And it has arthritis in it, and that is very, very painful. But I would also develop arthritis in my right hip. Even before that, by the time I was 40, the arthritis in my right hip was starting to let itself be known. And I would end up with a total hip replacement in January of 18. And now my left hip is becoming painful. The last time I had an x-ray on it, it showed arthritis, but it wasn't anywhere near as severe as the right side was. Am I ever going to have a hip replacement on the left side? I don't know. That first hip replacement cost me $22,000 out of pocket. I definitely cannot absorb a bill like that in my present state, so probably won't be having that hip replacement. I might have to have the new hip replaced. They don't last forever. So anyway, that is what happened to me on May 2nd, 1982, 41 years ago. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.